And welcome to the SpartanMag.com VCast. Jim Comparoni, Paul Konyndyk. Outside Sparty Watch right now going on. Been going on for more than a week. Spartan Stadium back there. Big rivalry week. You guys all know that. Michigan State getting ready to go down and play number 4 ranked Michigan in Ann Arbor on Saturday night. Michigan State going for their 3rd straight victory. Something that no one is giving Michigan State a chance to do. Win 3 straight. We've talked about it. We talked about it last week on the Spartan Mag Live. Today, Harlan Barnett, Peyton Thorne, Jacoby Windman, Xavier Henderson all spoke, and it was kind of funny. Harlan Barnett was trying hard not to give any bulletin board material. He knows what that's all about, but you could just feel the intensity on behalf of that assistant coach. Would you agree with that, Paul?
Oh, absolutely, and he's usually one of the guys that's tried it out during this week, and it's always the same thing. He's like, energized. This game means a lot to him like it does to every former player. One of the things we consistently hear from the players that get trotted out is that former players have said over and over to them how important this game is to them. And you've got a couple guys on staff, and Courtney Hawkins, wide receivers coach, and Harlan Barnett, defensive backs coach, that have made that crystal clear. And, the players will experience that for themselves in the game, the ones that haven't. But, when you have guys like that, and then you've got Xavier Henderson, who is out here, the rivalry becomes pretty real. And being a 22-point underdog or whatever it is at this point, I think that just adds to it. These guys don't think that they're going to lose the game, and this is one game I can say unequivocally that these guys go into every year thinking that they're going to win, and I do think that's an important deal. I don't always feel like that when they play Ohio State. I did. At the height of the D'Antonio era, back in 2015, 2013, around then at Michigan State felt, hey, we've got the talent to beat these guys. We've got the willpower. I don't feel like that right now with Michigan State and Ohio State, but I feel like that with Michigan State, and that's where it starts, the self-belief.
Right, and if you go by the way Michigan State played some of these games earlier in the year, especially against Minnesota, the Michigan State team that played against Minnesota cannot beat Michigan. But people that think that it's going to be the same Michigan State team that takes the field on Saturday, it's going to be a different Michigan State team. Now, Michigan State, Mel Tucker was talking about this yesterday. They have not played their best 60 minutes of football yet. And it's possible that Michigan State could play their best 60 minutes of football and still lose by 21 points if Michigan is right and focused and sharp and good. That could still happen. But I do think Michigan State will come out and be the best Michigan State we've seen all year. I don't know what that'll end up being on the scoreboard, but Michigan had better not bring their C-plus game, because I think Michigan State's the timing is good for them coming off a bye week. I realize both teams have a bye week, but having played a game with Slade and Henderson back in the lineup, then a bye week, and then maybe some more healthy players coming back. I'm not saying it's a great Michigan State team. I'm saying it's a Michigan State team we've not seen play yet. I'm not saying it's going to be great, and then you add the rivalry factor. Everybody knows about the cliches, throw the record books out the window. You really need to do that with this game, even if it is a 21-point swing. The point spread is based on how well Michigan played last week or 2 weeks ago and how poorly Michigan State has played at times this year. I always pick games, or I expect games based on what we've seen, the mode of operation to this point, the body of work to this point. I usually don't get caught up on trying to time a hunch. You have to time a hunch. In order to pick Michigan State to beat Wisconsin last week, you would have had to time a hunch a little bit. You wouldn't have known that Slade and Henderson were coming back. Then you saw the difference that they made. And I realize Wisconsin doesn't have the greatest offense in the world. But playing Wisconsin at that time was good because Wisconsin was like a watered-down version of Michigan. So that was all good. But the communication was better on defense last week. You saw Michigan State disguising things on defense. Not that they're great at it, but they didn't even try to disguise anything against Minnesota, for example. So Harlan Barnett said today, makes a lot of difference having X back there, saying Xavier Henderson is one of the smartest players he's ever coached, and the communication aspect of it is so much better now. That's just a small piece of what needs to go right for Michigan State to be competitive in this game. But my whole thing is, as bad as Michigan State was against Minnesota, Michigan State could still lose this game 42-10, but that version of Michigan State is not taking the field on Saturday.
Yeah, and the version of Minnesota that Michigan State saw isn't taking the field again this year. I mean, a lot of it is timing. You look at the game that Michigan State played against Maryland. If they played Maryland right now with the players that they have right now, I think Michigan State would have won that game. If they played Minnesota right now with the players that they have back, I think Michigan State would have won that game.
I think you're right.
So one of the things that you look at with the bye week, both teams are coming off a bye week, but when do you want a bye week? If you're Michigan State, you want a bye week to get healthy. If you're Michigan, you're coming off your best performance or your best visual performance of the year, and you don't have very many injuries, so you want to keep that thing rolling. And I don't know. I mean, to me, human nature is a big deal. And if you're Michigan and you're looking at what Michigan State has done on film so far, you're going to be underwhelmed and underimpressed, and you're going to think, hey, we're going to put a hole in them, and you're going to be looking at the Minnesota game.
And you're going to want to blow them out. You're going to go to the game not to win the game, but to blow them out. And that can get a little seedy.
I mean, the thing with Michigan State is I don't know what Michigan State is their best 60 minutes looks like, because I haven't seen their best team on the field. And I'm not saying that that's going to be the case this week. I felt last year Michigan State really cycled up and gave their best performance of the season against them in that Michigan game. I think there was a slow downhill spiral after that because of injuries. That's one of the reasons why they wanted to get more depth in the offseason. Well, that depth isn't really there, but they're starting to get guys back. I want to see what Jacob Slade looks like being able to play 40 snaps instead of 20. I want to see what Simeon Barrow looks like being able to play 40 snaps instead of 15 or 20.
Or less.
Yeah, and then, you look at, like two veteran safeties. If you get Kendall Brooks back, and all of a sudden, like some of the things that he did earlier in the season, I felt like he was really good. And if he doesn't have that mental load of having to make all the calls, and he can just go out there play, and
with Henderson,
which
we've never seen.
We haven't seen this year.
We've never seen those two play on the field together ever.
Right.
And one is, we know what Henderson is, and we know what Brooks has become. That's a couple of big physical, experienced, big-bodied guys. I don't know what that's going to look like, but it could potentially stack up well against a very good rushing attack.
Yeah, on the flip side, if you're Michigan State, we're talking about the defense right now and how bad the defense was early and what they can do now. But one of the things, if you go back and look at that Wisconsin game, Michigan State's offense did enough running the football, possessing the football, getting first downs to allow that defense to stay in the game. A game like Michigan, it's a better version of Wisconsin, but where this thing can get away from Michigan State is if they have a lot of 3-and-outs, if the defense is on the field for a long time. Because Michigan State's best version on defense isn't a defense that can sustain playing at a high level for 80 plays. Xavier Henderson's back, yes, but he can't play 80 plays. Slade, those guys, they can't play 80 plays. This defense can't hold up, for an 80-play type game. They need to be able to get off the field. They need the offense to possess the ball, and if you can't do that, if you look at some of Michigan State's early games and some of where they went wrong, where the defense fell apart, a lot of it was the offense not doing its part. So that goes back to Mel Tucker's thing about complementary football, which is so cliche but true in this instance.
Yes.
For Michigan State to do anything of note on defense, they need the offense to be able to move the ball, and this can't turn into a one-sided field position game.
No.
A team like Michigan, the reason why it snowballs is they have a huge advantage in field position, and eventually that dam breaks.
Yes. So, I mean, I think I say this every year when they play Michigan. The first thing is you have to get first downs. Move the ball past your own 30, past your own 40, and if you have to punt it from there, that's fine. Give them a long field. Getting first down, staying out of third and long. Michigan this year, when I watched them on defense, statistically they're really good. I'm not sure they've played many good offensive teams, including Penn State. They did a good job against Penn State. But, first and second down, they play a lot of off coverage, a lot of zone, a lot of too deep type of stuff. You don't get as much press from them and pressure or blitzes until you're in third and long. Like there's been Michigan teams in the past that bring the pressure from 1st and 10, from the beginning. They don't do as much of that. Maybe they will in this game, and I think that might be a better way to go against Michigan State. I don't know. But, Michigan State with a run game showed signs of life against Wisconsin. Iowa ran the ball a little bit against Michigan, but they were behind, so they couldn't run it as much as they wanted to. They had no passing attack to have complementary football. Iowa didn't. But Iowa, they had some little 7 and 8 yard gains like Michigan State did against Wisconsin. I think Michigan State's running attack can be as good as Iowa's was, but have the offense complement to go with it theoretically. So Michigan State has a lot of work to do. They need to play the best that we've seen them play all year. And Thorne, coming off a good game against Wisconsin, that he's got to be feeling good. And out here today, I could sense some confidence from him, some some razor sharp focus. Like these guys are eager to get out there and show what they can do. I know that's a cliche too, but they've seen film, and like Tucker said on Monday, Tucker showed film to the players, plays that other teams have had success against Michigan. Michigan's very good. They might beat Ohio State again this year, but top to bottom, they're not as, amazingly talented as Ohio State is. They're human, just like Ohio State is. Now, is Michigan aware that they're human? Or does Michigan think, even though they've lost this game 2 times in a row, are they overly eager to go out and have this coronation and blow them out like all their friends are telling them that it's certainly going to happen?
I think that's one of the things that's interesting about
rat poison.
That's one of the interesting things about this rivalry. No matter how many games Michigan State wins, or no matter how well they acquit themselves in this game, winners of 10 out of the last 14. There's an excuse for why Michigan State won that game every year.
Michigan State never wins that game.
Right. They always,
10 times it's been it's Brady Hoke's fault, or
there's always an excuse. So it doesn't change. No matter how many times Michigan State wins this game, they will always, they will always be looked down upon.
Harbaugh didn't throw enough last year.
So there's all different reasons for that. So it's like psychologically, I think Michigan State, they honestly have nothing to lose in this game. So that's something that'll be interesting. But you're going back to Peyton Thorne. I'll say this: he can be as razor sharp as he wants to be in practice, but he needs. I look at some of the things that could go wrong for Michigan State. I think Spencer Brown will probably have a good game. He's an in-state kid. I think he's really mindful and caring, and he's a player that's working hard and moving in the right direction. I look at a guy like Jarrett Horst, and Michigan State won despite him last year in this game. And he has been playing on the borderline throughout the season of doing – it's okay to play with emotions. It's okay to play, on the edge. But he's a guy that plays with selfish emotions and gets Michigan State in trouble. And I look at things that could possibly go wrong. If you're Peyton Thorne, you can't have guys like that missing assignments and retaliating with boneheaded plays because they feel sorry for themselves.
Right.
So, and on both sides of the football.
And he'll have a bullseye on him. They'll be goading him to try to get him to get thrown out of the game or worse or something like that. So Horst has to keep it on the tracks.
There's nothing worse than seeing a guy that is not even involved in a play, drive someone into the ground and get a 15-yard penalty and negate a good running play or something like that.
Right.
These are the kind of things that afterwards, if Michigan State loses a game, we're sitting there talking about, well, it felt like they ran the ball pretty well. Well, yeah, maybe they did, but it gets negated by stupid stuff. And both teams have to be wary of that. But Michigan State can't, to go on the road and win a game like this against a team that's better than them statistically, and probably should beat them, but maybe won't. You can't be selfish. You can't do stupid things that hurt your team. You have to play selfless football and not selfish football.
And the first building block is you have to contain the run. You can't give Blake Corum 60-yard touchdown runs. And that's one of the ways Iowa kind of stayed in the game. It was 20-7, with 10 minutes to go, and Iowa was down inside the 5-yard line, about to make it 20-14, and then kicking back off with 5 minutes to go. But instead, they got stopped on 4th and short with just a terrible play call and pass. Maybe not the play call, but the execution of a pass play that was similar to it just was bad. But Iowa stayed in it. Michigan ran the ball, but didn't blow holes in Iowa. I know this is a month ago, and teams change in a month, but Iowa's very well coached defense. Everybody knows that. But I'm telling you, Iowa's defensive tackles are not the usual Iowa defensive tackles. Those two guys were 6'5", 275. That's tall and lean. And, Michigan's double-team blocking was able to move them a little bit here and there, but they were not the usual Iowa defensive tackles. You look at those guys compared to Simeon Barrow at 305 and Maverick Hansen at 310, 315, and Slade at 310, and, Derek Harmon going in there at 320. Even Penn State's defensive tackles, I know Mustafa is good, but Penn State was so bad in terms of, they're light, and Penn State was they're poorly coached in terms of gap responsibility. They just are. They were that way when Manny Diaz was at Miami. They were leaving, they were not good with gap integrity.
They had big sack numbers every year when he was there, but they did the fundamental stuff. They cheat, not cheated, but they took unnecessary risks, and that shows up in good numbers, but it's bad football.
Iowa was successful. The longest running play on the ground for Michigan the whole game was 20 yards. Corum had a 20-yard run, and Edwards had a 12-yard run. And I know Edwards was just coming back from from being injured. So Edwards is at a higher level now. Now Edwards, health-wise, and Edwards is playing against in-state opponent. So Edwards is going to be great. But that's the path to victory starts with that. Contain the run. Don't give up those 40-yarders and 70-yarders like Penn State did. Iowa was able to do that, even though their defensive tackles are not great. So Michigan State, when Michigan plays against Michigan State, they may see it on film, but I don't know if they'll be surprised or not, but Michigan State will be the best defensive tackles they've faced so far this year because Michigan played nobody in the pre-conference schedule. Indiana's Indiana. Maryland's okay in the defensive line, but not as good as Michigan State defensive line. Michigan State's better at the middle now with Windman there as well. So if Michigan runs for 275 in this game, tip your hat to them, man. That's outstanding run offense if they're able to do that. And Michigan, as good as they are with their blocking and the two running backs, they're very good, with moving tight ends around and pulling a guard here and there, or getting you leaning one way and hitting you back another way with counter runs and so forth. Penn State was not good at just moving linebackers and fitting on the fly. Tucker talked about this yesterday, the importance of fitting your gaps, having your initial gap responsibility, but also how your gap responsibility changes based on who's pulling and what the motions are. He didn't come out and say that, but the motions and trades and things like that. Michigan State having a week off to get right on gap responsibility is going to help Michigan State. I realize that Michigan had a bye week too, but in this case, in terms of the first building block to being competitive in this game, stopping the run, Michigan State, I think, has a chance to contain it and keep it under 200 like Iowa did. Keep them under 200. Now, the question is, does Michigan State come out like they did last year, stop the run, and put extra people in there, and force, last year it was McNamara to throw downfield. At that point, McNamara had never really thrown downfield, but he showed early and often against Michigan State that he could and would throw downfield. Will Michigan State go single safety deep and sell out to stop the run and make McCarthy throw? McCarthy's got all kinds of talent, leads the nation in completion percentage, but an astronomical number of his completions are 15 yards downfield or closer. A lot of them are behind the line of scrimmage. He completes like 85% up to 10 yards. He can do it, but it seems to me that Harbaugh is not yet comfortable with having him do it. He made a play against Iowa where he threw the ball up in the air and it hit the ground harmlessly, but it wasn't a good decision, and they showed Harbaugh on the sideline, and Harbaugh, kind of reacted like this. To Harbaugh, the best way to show dominance is to run the ball 60 times, and you can't stop it. Even when he was at Stanford, that's the epitome of football to him. Will Harbaugh take what the defense gives and throw like they did last year with McNamara? Does he want McCarthy doing it? McCarthy can do it, and the receivers are good enough, and Michigan State's pass defense is questionable enough that Michigan's best way to operate is to throw to the air and attack. But will Harbaugh do it? I think that's going to be interesting to watch unfold.
Probably not in a rivalry game when you're trying to make a statement.
Yeah.
And that's another one of these things. Like when they look at film, we're talking about how good Michigan State's defensive tackles are. We still haven't seen a game where you had four good defensive tackles playing together because they haven't played together this year. Like all those guys have been dinged up. Barrow was dinged up coming out of training camp. Slade, a little bit healthier, but obviously dinged up coming out of training camp, and then the other injury. And bye week has got to be great for Derek Harmon, an in-state kid, Maverick Hansen, an in-state kid. Those are two dudes that you like coming off the bench in a game like this, but I don't think that that's going to show up. I mean, Michigan's not going to change what they do, because they're playing Michigan State. The whole point of this for them, and I think in a lot of ways is for them, like what the MO has been throughout the Harbaugh era, is to cave people in late. A lot of those lopsided scores, it's late fourth quarter dominance because other teams have been worn down. That's not going to change. He's not going to he might go, and McCarthy might take some shots, and and McCarthy's got more of a running threat.
Yes.
So that's another arrow in the quiver that you wish, if you're Michigan State, that he didn't have, because you can have everything covered up and this guy can scramble for some big plays, and that's kind of demoralizing. But they're not going to change who they are just because they're playing Michigan State. You don't do that in rivalry games.
And that would be something, if you're Michigan State, you want that to happen. You want them to try to prove it on the ground because that gives you a chance to stop them. You might not be able to stop them, but if you do, it runs clock and it shortens the game, and it favors the less talented team if the game gets shortened. If Michigan theoretically spends too much time trying to establish the run. Right. I don't know, but they'll have, Michigan State.
But then going back to what I was saying earlier, if Michigan State can't possess the ball, if they can't move the ball on offense, it's a moot point, because eventually that game plan will kind of trundle downhill just the way Michigan wants it to. So
if you contain the run like we're talking about, you might hold Michigan to 27.
Right.
Now, how can this offense score 28?
Right.
That's the next
because
part.
you're looking at not only is Michigan a top 10 offense, they're a top 10 defense. And part of that, I mean, all that stuff ties in together, right? I mean, so we'll see. But you look at the schedule too, and like if you look at the Michigan State has played a far tougher schedule than Michigan has to this point in the season. So there's not going to be. I don't see a chance that Michigan State's going to have a deer in the headlights type, moment against Michigan. Now you never know because it's a night game and you're sitting around all day, and you don't know what's going to happen. But Michigan State, I don't think will be intimidated by this Michigan team.
It'll be interesting. Michigan State obviously has to stay away from like little sloppy fumbles and things like that. I mean, you get in trouble in a hurry if you give them any mistakes. Michigan State has to be sound with, avoid mistakes, avoid turnovers like they did last year. But if they can contain the run clock, Michigan, is a good sparring partner to that and runs clock, shortens the game. Maybe he can hold them to 24. Red zone defense. Talked about this last week in SpartanMag Live. Michigan is outstanding on offense. Contain if you can. Then get in the red zone and make them kick field goals like last year. I think if Harbaugh looks back at last year, he's going to wish that he'd gone for it on fourth down a couple of those times. There are a couple like 4th and 2.5 situations, like on the edge of the red zone where they kicked field goals that percentage-wise that they might have picked up and made it a different game. In this game, will Michigan, if Michigan State is fortunate enough to stop them and put them in situations in 4th and 2 and near the red zone, does Michigan go for it this year rather than kick field goals? I suspect this year they might.
Yeah, because you have a quarterback that can run the football. I mean, that's a game changer on 4th and short. I mean, really, it's a whole lot different. If we've seen Ohio State, going all the way back to Braxton Miller, and like if you have that guy that can pick up that, even Michigan State with Peyton Thorne, if you have that guy that can run for it, those are expensive downs because you open yourself up to risk. But if you've got that guy in a game like this, that's a big deal.
Yeah.
Michigan State's been pretty good at some of those 4th down stops this year. They've done a nice job, and in this game during the Mel Tucker era, they've done a nice job at stopping a lot of people on 4th down. In surprising fashion.
And they put those extra defensive tackles in there. And we've seen Deshaun Mallory play some defensive end. We saw Simeon Barrow play some defensive end last week in a goal line situation 2 weeks ago at defensive end. So Michigan State has some athletic defensive tackles that potentially have played some defensive end, which helps Michigan State in short yardage. So if Michigan wants to go for it in 4th and short, Michigan was stopped on 4th and short against Iowa. But it's a great running attack that Michigan has. And they get the double team going with a really good center. And those running backs with Corum, Corum's always been fast, but this year he's kind of added some leg drive or something. He for a little dude, he's also a pile mover.
Yeah.
So that's when Tucker was talking about getting population to the ball and forming a human arrow and gang tackling and getting people there. That's to limit the yards after contact. Corum, the highlights are good with the speed. But what impresses me also about Corum is his 7 and 8 yard runs where he's hit at 3 yards and drives a pile 5 yards further.
Reminds me of Javon Ringer a little bit early in his career. Like when everyone was saying, well, that was when Jehu Kalkrook was still there, and everyone was like, where are the touchdowns going to come from? Like he's not a goal line guy. He's never done that. He's a big play guy, but then he comes in and he absolutely is. And I'm not saying that Corum is that guy yet, but he's a good tailback. And I do feel like the Donovan Edwards and Corum together, there is more punch there in terms of big play threat than they had last year with Hassan Haskins.
Mm-hmm. And their tight ends are good with the way they block. With Schoonmaker's excellent, good dual threat tight end. They don't have Eric All, an excellent tight end. That hurts Michigan a little bit because with him, that makes that offense even harder to stop. The Michigan defense, Mozzie Smith, we heard all kinds of stuff about him in the preseason, about how he was setting all kinds of strength records at Michigan like no one had ever had, like the power and the punch and the explosion and all these things that he has. And he's 320 and all that stuff. But, Paul, they play him every play. Right. And I watch him, I'm like, man, that guy looks like he's pacing himself a little bit. He continually gets pushed off the line of scrimmage 3 and 4 yards by double teams. When he gets loose and has good straight line, short area quickness, you can see some uncommon burst for a guy that big. But he's playing a lot of snaps.
I don't know what the deal is with that. I've always felt like Harbaugh teams, there is some wear down because they have the people to rotate, but they don't. And I don't understand why. Like defensive tackle, and especially for a guy that's an NFL guy. I mean, you look at the best defensive lines in the NFL, and they're spending money on 8 defensive linemen. Mm-hmm. I mean, interior defensive linemen, and you just can't sustain a high level of play physically if you're not rotating. And I think Mozzie Smith he's a pretty good player. But again, I thought Cliff Ryan was a heck of a player at Michigan State, and you can't play 80 plays.
Yeah, he's.
They haven't really had to because of the way their season has transpired. I mean, Michigan's defense, he plays a lot of plays. They're not on the field. They haven't been on the field as much as some of Michigan State's defensive players. But if they get in a game like that, if Michigan State is able to move the ball and it ends up into one of those where it's 70 plays for Michigan State's offense or 65 or whatever, there is a wear down factor.
And he's a good player, and he's coming off a bye week, and he's playing an in-state game, so he'll be all fired up too. Michigan's linebackers surprised me how firm they are when they take on offensive linemen. They push them back on pass rush, and they do a good job defeating blocks. Those linebackers are underrated, I think, for Michigan. So Michigan State, just to stay in the game, a lot of things have to go well for Michigan State, and then you have to get a play on special teams, and you have to win the turnover battle and all those things, and then your offense has to be better than we've seen them so far this year. Showed signs of life against Wisconsin. That was encouraging for Michigan State. But it's a similar deal to 2 years ago in the COVID year when Michigan State went down there and Ricky White came out of nowhere and beat them deep. Does Michigan State have anything kind of special thing going on like that with Keon Coleman or Malik Carr? Can they get loose? That's where Michigan State needs to have a magic wand once or twice on offense to try to stay in it. And then if Michigan State, all those things do go well and Michigan's a little bit down and Michigan does make a couple mistakes and Michigan State's in it, then Michigan State's problem in the kicking game, and I'm not sure Michigan State can win a game late in that fashion.
Yeah, there's a lot of things. You go back to what could possibly go wrong for Michigan State versus what could go wrong for Michigan, and I just feel like the number.
It's a long list.
It's a long list for Michigan State, but we've seen a lot of times going into this game where I felt like Michigan had a pretty decisive advantage. Even going all the way back to 2015, the way Michigan State I think was playing in that game going into it, versus how Michigan was playing, and Michigan State has found a way to win some of these games. But it's going to take. They got to be opportunistic too on both sides of the football. You can't drop interceptions if they present themselves. You can't not take advantage of a short field if you get a return, or you can't get penalties in the return game. If that negate a punt return for a touchdown or something like that. So there's a lot on the plate that Michigan State has to work on, needs to get better at. But I really feel after watching that Wisconsin game, after watching Wisconsin play Purdue last week, I think that I feel better about that Michigan State-Wisconsin game because I still think that Wisconsin is a pretty good team. It's a better team than I thought they were when Michigan State played them. So we'll see what happens. But these games are always fun to cover. They're fun to watch for Michigan State fans, and Michigan State's had a heck of a lot of success in this rivalry recently with 10 out of the last 14.
There's a percentage chance that Michigan will win this game, 42-7, like some people think, 35-7. But there's also a percentage chance that Michigan State's going to be competitive in this game, and I think there's a greater chance of that than the other. It could go either way in terms of those two scenarios. But I think Michigan State shows up, hits hard, plays well, plays some sound defense, and stays in this thing. And if they stay in it, and the emotions and the psychology changes, if this is still a game after the third quarter. Anything else, Paul? It's going to be fun. We'll be in Ann Arbor checking that one out on Saturday. Appreciate all the viewers here at SpartanMag.com. For Paul Konyndyk, Jim Comparoni outside the Sparty Watch. Some band practice going on back here in East Lansing with the Spartans. The VCast, SpartanMag.com.